Stormfall on Echelon 9. Vance Forrester crawled through the mud of Echelon 9, each movement sending jolts of pain through his left side where the shrapnel had torn through his combat suit. The acid rain of this forsaken moon pelted his helmet, the droplets hissing as they made contact with the reinforced polymer. His squad was gone, vaporized when the Austravian shock troops had dropped their gravity mines from orbit. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd survived where 17 better soldiers had died, and for what? To die slowly on a worthless chunk of rock that both sides claimed had strategic importance. From his current position, face down in alien soil that smelled like burnt circuitry and decay, the only strategy that mattered was survival. His combat HUD flickered erratically, occasionally showing him the broken terrain ahead, a landscape of twisted metal and half-collapsed structures that had once been a thriving mining outpost. Now it was just another battlefield in the endless war between the United Terran Alliance and the Austravian Dominion. 10 years of fighting over resources, planets, and principles that got muddier with each passing year. Vance checked his pulse rifle. Jammed. Of course. He'd have to rely on his sidearm and the combat knife strapped to his thigh. The Austravian patrols would be sweeping the area, looking for survivors. Standard procedure was to leave no one alive, not since the Battle of Proxima, where captured humans had somehow managed to sabotage 3 Austravian dreadnoughts from the inside. Night was falling, the strange purple hue of Echelon 9's atmosphere deepening to a bruised indigo. His only hope was to reach the emergency extraction point in Sector 12, assuming it was still operational. Assuming anyone was still looking for survivors. He activated his suit's thermal dampeners, hoping to mask his heat signature from Austravian scanners. The system whirred pathetically, operating at maybe 30% capacity. Better than nothing. Movement caught his eye, silent, graceful shadows weaving through the debris field ahead. Austravian scouts. They moved like liquid darkness, their armor seeming to absorb the failing light. Vance froze, pressing himself deeper into the mud. Unlike humans, who relied heavily on vision, the Austravians had evolved heightened auditory senses. They could detect a whisper from 50 meters away, which made them lethal hunters. Vance held his breath as one scout paused, head tilting in that distinctively alien way. Its helmet retracted, revealing features that were disturbingly close to human, yet undeniably other. Porcelain white skin that seemed to have a subtle luminescence. Eyes too large, with vertical pupils that dilated in the darkness. The characteristic crest ridges along the temples that marked all Austravians. The scout sniffed the air, then continued on. Vance exhaled slowly. A soft crunch behind him. He whirled, heart hammering, hand reaching for his sidearm. But what stood before him wasn't an Austravian soldier. She was Austravian, without question. The same otherworldly elegance, the same luminous skin and large, vertical-pupiled eyes. But she wore no armor. Instead, she was dressed in what appeared to be civilian clothing, a flowing garment of material that shifted colors like oil on water. Her hair fell in long, silver braids adorned with what appeared to be crystalline beads. Most striking of all was her expression. Not hatred. Not the cold calculation he'd seen in Austravian soldiers. Curiosity. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic, with that strange harmonic quality all Austravians possessed. Vance raised his sidearm, knowing it was probably useless but unwilling to die without a fight. "Austravian," he stated flatly. She tilted her head, studying the weapon. "That's broken," she said simply. He glanced down. The power cell was cracked, leaking blue fluid. The weapon was as useless as his rifle. "Why aren't you calling for your people?" he asked, eyes darting toward where the scouts had disappeared. She looked past him toward the horizon, something shifting in her expression. "I don't belong to them." A distant rumble echoed across the landscape, approaching dropships, most likely. Vance tensed, preparing to run, though he knew it was futile. When he looked back, she had moved closer, soundless as a ghost. "You'll die out here," she said. Not a threat. A statement of fact. Come with me. Why? He asked, suspicion sharp in his voice. So you can interrogate me in some Australian prison? Something that might have been amusement flickered across her features. We don't all work like that. She extended her hand, palm up. Not touching him, simply offering. Choose, Vance Forrester. He froze. How do you know my name? You're not as invisible as you think, she replied. And we've been watching. Who's we? But she didn't answer. Instead, she turned and began walking toward a ridge in the distance, her movements fluid and silent. She didn't look back, simply expecting him to follow. Against every instinct hammered into him during years of combat training, against the memory of watching his squad disintegrate in Australian attacks, against the very foundation of the war that had defined his life for a decade, Vance followed her. The cave was concealed beneath an overhang, sealed with a form of biotechnology that responded to her touch. Inside, it was unexpectedly dry and cool, illuminated by bioluminescent vines that crawled along the walls. Vance staggered as the adrenaline began to fade, his injuries making themselves known with renewed vengeance. She offered him a flask containing a liquid that tasted simultaneously sweet and metallic. He drank before caution could stop him, and immediately felt warmth spreading through his limbs, the edge of his pain dulling. What is this place? He asked, looking around at what appeared to be a sanctuary carved from the hostile environment outside. Safe, she said simply. Then, after a moment, I am Lyridia. You're Australian, he said, as if that explained everything. I was, she replied. Now I live here, where no one owns me. Vance sank against the wall, the strange drink making his head swim pleasantly. You could have killed me. I still might, she responded, but there was no malice in it. Despite himself, Vance barked a laugh, then winced as his ribs protested. I believe you. A silence settled between them, not entirely uncomfortable. Then she spoke again. I know you think we're monsters. He looked at her sharply. You invaded our colonies. Destroyed entire cities. What should we think? You only see half the war, she said, her large eyes reflecting the bioluminescent light. The other half is buried in a history your leaders won't acknowledge. Vance wanted to argue, to defend the cause he'd bled for. But exhaustion was claiming him, the strange drink pulling him toward unconsciousness. As darkness took him, he had one last coherent thought: why would the daughter of the Australian queen risk everything to save an enemy soldier? And how did he know, with absolute certainty, that's exactly who she was? The luminous encounter. Vance awoke to the sound of singing, at least, he thought it was singing. The melody was unlike anything he'd ever heard, oscillating between frequencies that shouldn't have been audible to human ears, yet somehow resonated in his chest like a physical presence. He opened his eyes to find Lyridia kneeling beside a pool of luminescent liquid at the far end of the cave. Her hands hovered over its surface, causing ripples that glowed with increasing intensity as her song continued. He watched in silence, momentarily forgetting his situation in the strange beauty of the scene. When she finished, the light in the pool stabilized, casting soft blue reflections across the cave walls. She turned, seemingly unsurprised to find him awake. Your wounds are healing, she observed. Vance glanced down at his side. The jagged tear in his combat suit had been sealed with some kind of crystalline substance, and beneath it, his skin tingled with a not unpleasant warmth. The pain had dulled to a manageable ache. What did you do to me? He asked, more curious than accusatory. Nothing your body wasn't designed to do already, she replied cryptically. I merely accelerated the process. Vance sat up cautiously, testing his limits. He felt stronger than he had any right to be after the injuries he'd sustained. Thank you, he said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue when addressed to an Australian. Lyridia inclined her head slightly. You're the first human to thank me for anything. You're the first Australian who hasn't tried to kill me on sight, he countered. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Fair exchange. Vance took in his surroundings properly for the first time. The cave was larger than he'd initially thought, extending back into the rock face. What he had assumed were simple bioluminescent vines were actually complex networks of living technology, Austravian biotech, far more advanced than anything he'd seen in combat. This wasn't just some random hideout. This was a fully equipped outpost. "You've been here a while," he observed. Lyridia moved to what appeared to be a workstation, her fingers dancing over surfaces that lit up at her touch. "3 of your Earth years," she confirmed. "Alone?" "By choice." Vance stood, relieved to find his legs steady beneath him. "Why? What's the daughter of Queen Zephyrine doing hiding in a cave on a contested moon?" Lyridia's hands stilled. She turned to him, eyes narrowing slightly. "How did you?" She stopped, studying him with new intensity. "Interesting. You shouldn't know that." "I don't," Vance admitted. "Not consciously. It just came to me when I was falling asleep." He frowned, disturbed by the implication. "Did you put something in my head?" "No," she said firmly. "But something is already there. Something that recognizes me." A chill ran down Vance's spine. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering directly, she gestured for him to follow her deeper into the cave. They passed through a narrow passage that opened into a second chamber, this one dominated by what appeared to be a garden, though unlike any garden Vance had ever seen. Plants of crystalline structure grew from beds of pulsating soil. Some resembled flowers with translucent petals that shifted hue with each gentle movement of air. Others were more geometric, their forms defying terrestrial botany. "The crystal garden," Lyridia said. "I've cultivated it from specimens rescued before they were destroyed in the war." Vance approached one of the crystal flowers, transfixed by its beauty. "We were told Austravians couldn't create, only destroy," he murmured. "And we were told humans were violent primitives who understood nothing beyond conquest," she replied. "Propaganda serves those in power on both sides." She gestured to a curved bench near a particularly stunning arrangement of what resembled glass orchids. As they sat, the plants seemed to lean toward them, responding to their presence. "I left because I saw the truth," Lyridia said after a moment. "This war isn't what either of our people believe it to be." "What is it, then?" Her gaze was steady, unblinking. "A manipulation. A game played by forces that have been orchestrating conflict between our species for generations." Vance frowned. "What forces?" "The architects," she said, the harmonics in her voice deepening with what might have been fear. "Beings neither human nor Austravian, who benefit from our mutual destruction." "That sounds like conspiracy thinking," Vance said carefully. "Does it?" Lyridia challenged. "Think, Vance Forrester. Why has this war continued for so long with neither side gaining a decisive advantage? Why do peace talks mysteriously collapse just as they begin to make progress? Why do both humans and Austravians keep finding reasons to hate each other, even as individuals like us can sit together without bloodshed?" Vance had asked himself similar questions during long nights between battles. The war had a pattern to it, an almost rhythmic quality that sometimes felt engineered rather than organic. But to accept what she was suggesting meant questioning everything he'd fought for. "If you're right," he said slowly, "why would these architects want our species to destroy each other?" "Resources. Power. Perhaps simple amusement," Lyridia said, her fingers tracing patterns in the crystalline soil. "Or perhaps because together, humans and Austravians would be a force they couldn't control." The crystal plants around them dimmed slightly, as if reacting to the gravity of her words. "You said I recognized you," Vance said, changing tack. "What did you mean?" Lyridia stood, moving to a small alcove carved into the wall. From it, she retrieved an object that resembled an ancient scroll made of some flexible metallic material. "Among my people, I am what you might call a memory singer," she explained. "We can perceive the threads of genetic memory that run through bloodlines. When I found you, I sensed something familiar, echoes of contact between your ancestors and mine. Peaceful contact, from before the wars began. She unrolled the scroll, revealing intricate patterns that shifted and moved like liquid. This is a record kept by my grandmother, who was also a memory singer. It shows an encounter between humans and Austravians nearly 3 centuries ago. A delegation sent to establish diplomatic relations. Vance leaned closer, fascinated despite his skepticism. The patterns coalesced into images, humans and Austravians standing together, hands clasped in what appeared to be a ceremony of some kind. These humans, Lyridia continued, pointing to a figure near the center, carried a genetic marker that allowed for deeper telepathic connection with Austravians. A natural bridge between our species. The marker has been systematically eliminated from the human genome over generations, through targeted warfare, strategic assassinations, and genetic manipulation. That's insane, Vance said. How could anyone orchestrate something like that without being detected? Time, Lyridia said simply. The architects think in centuries, not years. And they have agents among both our peoples, individuals who may not even know they're being influenced. She rolled the scroll closed, her expression grave. The reason you recognized me, Vance Forrester, is because you carry traces of this marker. Somehow, it survived in your bloodline when it was erased from so many others. Vance sat back, mind reeling. So what? I'm some kind of genetic anomaly. A throwback to a time before the war. You're a possibility, Lyridia corrected. A remnant of what should have been. And the fact that you exist at all means the architect's plan isn't perfect. A sudden tremor shook the cave, causing dust and small fragments to rain down from the ceiling. The crystal plants shuddered, their light flickering anxiously. What was that? Vance asked, instantly alert. Lyridia moved swiftly to her workstation, hands flying over the controls. Her expression darkened. Orbital bombardment. The battle for this moon is escalating. Another tremor, stronger this time. One of the crystal plants toppled from its bed, shattering on the floor. We need to move, Lyridia said, already gathering items into a small pack. They're targeting this region specifically. How could they know we're here? Vance asked, automatically falling into tactical assessment. Lyridia's eyes met his, fear visible for the first time. Because they've been looking for both of us for a very long time. And now that we're together, the threat we represent has become too significant to ignore. Both sides? No, she said grimly. Something else entirely. The cave shook violently, and part of the ceiling collapsed, revealing the storm-dark sky of Echelon 9. Through the gap, Vance caught sight of something that made his blood run cold, a ship unlike any human or Austravian vessel he'd ever seen, obsidian black and somehow wrong in its proportions, descending through the clouds. The architects, Lyridia whispered. They've found us.